TV. This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
And welcome everyone, RTV Sports Rap back again here on Rogers TV. Spencer Byers, your host, joining me today, Lucas Ireland and JC Coots, as JC and I are getting weather stormed in Wyerton and down, I believe, in Paisley. Lucas Ireland in KW is enjoying the sun, enjoying the clean streets of Kitchener. So good for you, Lucas, as JC and I try to shovel out our doors, driveways, and probably most of our cars as well. So with that, guys, we'll talk about the NFL, and a couple of the games did have some snow on the field, so they were proving that weather is also happening down south, even for the Americans. And I think we should start off with probably the two biggest upsets, you want to call that, the two favorites that went down. The Lions end up losing to the Washington Commanders. I wish Adrian Musso was here so I could stick it in his face, as well as the Baltimore Ravens, who were a betting favorite going to Buffalo to play the Bills. The Ravens capitulate again for what feels like the fourth year in a row, as Mark Andrews drops a absolute muffin in his hands into the end zone for the 2-point conversion to force overtime. He drops it. Buffalo wins 27-25, guys. I guess, JC, I'll start with you. What do you think was the bigger upset? The Ravens falling to the Bills and two really good teams, or do you think the Lions getting, honestly, kind of demolished by the Commanders in the end?
Oh, for sure. The Commanders and the Lions game was the bigger of the upsets. Unfortunately, we had an attack game that night, so we didn't get to watch most of the game. But trust me, we were glued to our phones getting the score updates throughout the evening. I ended up actually listening to the game on the drive home and then watching the tail end of it. And holy man, that was... I mean, we knew going into this game that this is two coaches who like to go for it, especially on fourth down. The punters might as well have just gone for pizza together and forgotten about the entire game. But if you were thinking that Jaden Daniels was the real deal, he proved it in this game. Like the Washington Commanders and the turnaround that organization had. I think it had been, 21 years or something like that since they last won a playoff game. And to do it against Detroit. Now, we knew Detroit was banged up, and we knew that there were going to be some issues there with them trying to go all the way this year. Some bad luck with the Lions. But no excuse to, they allow 45 points on the board, and they just could not contain the Washington Commanders, which just saying it out loud seems ridiculous. So by and far, that was the biggest upset, because most people had thought that this was likely going to be the year where we saw Detroit in the playoffs. Most hopefuls had thought it would be a Detroit-Buffalo final, and that one, fan base was forever going to be disappointed. But no, it won't be the Lions this year. It'll be the Commanders. And if I'm being honest, I'm kind of rooting for them against the Eagles here going into this conference championship weekend.
Well, Manny's also not here to gloat that his Eagles are now through. They beat the Los Angeles Rams in Philadelphia. They now get to host the Washington Commanders in a division rivalry, in an NFC East division fight for the NFC Championship. I mean, you can't write much of a better story than that. As well as, of course, the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Houston Texans, as the referees continue to allow the Chiefs to get away with a litany of different things that'll ire everybody in the NFL, even teams like me with the Niners, who aren't even in the NFL playoffs right now, and don't deserve to be, might I add, of how bad the Niners were this year with injuries like the poor Lions. But you still got to win the games you should win, especially in the division, which we did not. But with that being said, Lucas, I know you watched a lot of the Commanders versus Lions game. I guess, how did you kind of see that game unfolding with the Lions defense just not being able to stop the Jaden Daniels-led offense?
Well, I mean, it was a great game for the Commanders. Absolutely, Jaden Daniels proving that he is a great quarterback in his rookie season, and obviously, he's not going to be perfect every single game, but he looked very, very good against the Lions. But yeah, that's the one game that I really thought the Lions had that one going into it. I mean, KC over the Texans. Yeah, I had KC over that. I had the Eagles beating the Rams. I don't remember what my prediction for the other game there was for the Bills Ravens, but I definitely thought the Lions were going to be the team that came out on top. My brother's team versus my dad's team, as I alluded to before the show, and it was my dad's team that comes out on top with the Commanders. And now they've got a date with my uncle's team and the Eagles, so that should be a very interesting little addition to the rivalry for the two of them. But no, the Commanders played phenomenal. They played really really well, despite there being that ridiculous catch, that one-handed catch by one of the Lions. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head, but props to the Commanders for continuing this Cinderella run. And just like JC, I'm rooting for them as the playoffs continue, and we'll see if they can beat the Eagles this weekend.
Well, Lucas, with that, as you mentioned, the Commanders go to Philadelphia to play the Eagles in an NFC East rivalry matchup for the championship. You've also got then the Chiefs hosting the Bills in a rematch. Just happens just about every year because, again, they're 1-2, 1-3 every single year in the AFC. Lucas, who do you see making the Super Bowl now? Again, a lot of us picked the Lions to make it. They now no longer can. So who do you think makes the Who do you think makes the Super Bowl? Who do you think is the two teams destined to play?
Well, it's an interesting one because I remember my dad showing me a picture of what someone said that the Super Bowl would look like, and you look at it, I'm trying to question it a little bit, especially before the playoff games, and that was the Washington Commanders and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I think that's exactly what we're going to see. The Commanders, like I said, they're on a Cinderella run right now. It's been a long time since they've won a playoff game, let alone two, which they've already done this year. I think that they have a pretty solid chance to do it against the Eagles. It's going to be a tough test, mind you, but I think that they can do it, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. And of course, with KC, I mean, you alluded to it. The Well, a lot of people look at their games and say that the officiating is the main or only reason as to why Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are winning. And I do see that continuing. Whether the officiating is part of it or not doesn't matter. I do see the Kansas City Chiefs beating the Bills, despite me rooting for the Bills on that one. But nonetheless, we should be in for a great last few games heading into the Super Bowl.
One thing, JC, we haven't mentioned yet is how poorly Jared Goff played in that divisional game against the Commanders. A couple of picks. One was a pick six for the Commanders. Obviously not his best day, and he openly admitted that at the end of season presser that this game will eat him up for the rest of the offseason. You guys will eat up the rest of the Lions for all the offseason because of how good the team is and them now most likely losing both coordinators. Again, Coach Dan Campbell came out and said he expects to lose both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn this offseason. He's already lost Ben Johnson, who was announced to be the Bears head coach just a couple days ago. Aaron Glenn has been interviewed for a couple of different other head coaching vacancies right now. I think the Jaguars included, who I think may be the favorite for him at this point. So I guess, JC, now looking at the conference games, who do you think are destined to be in the Super Bowl in just a couple weeks' time?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be rooting for the Washington Commanders. It's going to be a tough game for a rookie quarterback because that is a lot of pressure. And I mean, we've seen these rookies before where they show some promise through the playoffs. And you know what? Josh Allen is a prime example of that in his younger years. And even so is Patrick Mahomes. Like, it takes some time. You do have to learn how to lose before you can learn how to win. But that said, too, I think the Eagles are kind of ripe for the picking. I mean, you're going to be riding high if you're the Washington Commanders right now. You got everything and all the momentum in the world behind you. So I will be rooting for the Commanders, although the Eagles are heavily favored right now. I think they're 5.5-point favorites in this game. So it's probably going to be Philadelphia, but my heart says the Commanders, and won't that be sweet to bring that organization back into some glory days? Because if Jaden Daniels is the real deal, I mean, his career trajectory right now is just straight up, and he's going to go for a while with this team, which will be fun to see and bring them back into the fold. On the other side of the coin, this is a matchup we've seen a few times before between Kansas City and Buffalo in the playoffs. We knew that these two were likely on a collision course to face each other again. You've got the potential MVP in Josh Allen, and I think he's going to be it. I mean, he just beat the other potential MVP in Lamar Jackson and showed how much better he was. And now this is it. Like, they've had 3 straight playoff losses to Kansas City. If Buffalo is the real deal, they got to do it this year. And this is the year where Kansas City actually might be a little bit weaker than they've been in any of their past years. I know they're going for the third straight Super Bowl. I know it'll be a record, I think, to win 3 in a row, but I think that this is the year that Buffalo finally gets by them. They have to get by them. They have to. I mean, you're guys like Von Miller, who are going to put a tremendous amount of pressure onto Mahomes. He's 35. Like, he's getting near the end. If he's going to make it happen with the Bills, it's got to be this year. And the same with Josh Allen. This is the mountain that is Kansas City. If you can climb that mountain and get to the peak by beating them, you are going to win the Super Bowl. And it will be, it is going to be jubilation in the streets of Buffalo. We will hear about this for years to come. It will be written that Josh Allen will be one of the greatest of all time if he can beat Mahomes, get to the Super Bowl, and then win the Super Bowl. So I like Buffalo. I think they're getting by them this year, even though it's a very tight, I think it's 1.5 points or something like that right now in favor of Kansas City. But I think Buffalo does it. I think Josh Allen has the tools. He's fast. He's quick. He'll run it in for a touchdown if he needs to. This is their time. So Buffalo, Washington is what the heart says, but the head says it'll be Buffalo, Philly.
Well, with that, JC, there's a couple of rematches that are very possible right now. Obviously, if it's the Philadelphia Eagles and KC, they played just a couple of years ago with the Chiefs beating the Eagles. And obviously, all of the parallels with that, Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid playing his old team. And then you've also got the Buffalo Bills versus the Washington Commanders, JC, which you said is your heart choice. If those two teams play, it'll be a rematch of 1991, where Buffalo lost their second of 4 consecutive Super Bowls, which I know made Gord Chapman very upset. Shout out to you, Gord, if you're out there watching this. So there's a lot of parallels and a lot of rematches that are very possible with these 4 teams that could make it through. I'll give my predictions quick. I can't pick the Eagles in good conscience, so I'll pick the Washington Commanders to get the upset down in Philadelphia and continue their Cinderella run. And in the AFC, I also don't think I can pick the Chiefs with any real honesty because they beat my Niners not too long ago. So I will take the Buffalo Bills in a rematch of 1991. And then I'm not really sure who I'd pick in that final, but give me, you know what, Buffalo fans, you've had enough turmoil, you've had enough heartbreak. You finally get one. You finally get over the hump. Buffalo Bills, Super Bowl champs. I can see all my friends who are Buffalo Bills fans celebrate their Super Bowl win, and I'd be happy for them because the first one in their franchise's history and probably be the last one for another 50 or 60 years. But regardless of that, JC, we'll now move over to more football that happened just this past week. Just a day ago on Monday, the NCAA National Championship was held, and the winner is, as many of us predicted, the Ohio State Buckeyes. They did beat the Notre Dame Fighting Irish 34-23. A late comeback by the Fighting Irish was just not enough to beat the $20 million NIL roster of the Buckeyes, JC. And to be expected with how good Ohio State was this year, even with their loss to Michigan at the end of the year, even with their loss down at Autzen and Eugene playing the Oregon Ducks, who were the #1 team in the nation basically all year. They avenged that loss to Oregon in the playoff as well. You could almost argue with looking at this team and how many guys are going to get drafted over the next 3 or 4 years that this Ohio State team is one of the best teams ever constructed in the NCAA, in my opinion. JC, what'd you make of the game with the Buckeyes being the now national champions?
Well, it was a bit interesting to try to explain to my wife why I needed to watch this game last night. And she's like, well, college football, you don't watch that. I'm like, well, it's Notre Dame. They haven't won since 1988. And I mean, who doesn't love the movie Rudy? And also, I'm rooting for him. I think that Riley Leonard was the real deal. And I mean, he almost was. I mean, it was 31-7 at one point, was it not? And they ran back through that game. Unfortunately, both quarterbacks were outstanding. And I don't think there is any surprise that Ohio State won. But based on the comeback, I'd always like to say if they had 5 more minutes, they might have tied that game because they were pressing. The Fighting Irish were, and it was an outstanding game. Was it the best college football matchup of all time? No, it wasn't the best final ever, but it was a great final. And I mean, you know, it was big when even Joe Bowen, the play-by-play announcer for the Toronto Maple Leafs, took the night off last night. The Leafs played Tampa. He didn't call the game, because he wanted to be at home to watch the Irish with his sons. And he called in he for the first time in 43 years, he called in and said, I'm not coming to work tonight because I got to watch a football game. So, I mean, we almost saw some history made. Unfortunately, we didn't. But great for Ohio State. I saw King James was at the game last night, cheering it up, whooping it up for Ohio. So that was cool. Great venue in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, and no surprises. But really, it at the end of the day, we got to see a matchup that kind of went down to the wire.
I know, Lucas, you watched quite a bit of the game between the Buckeyes and the Fighting Irish, and as JC illustrated, the Irish are probably, if not the most historic team in the NCAA, they're one of the most historic teams in all of college sports. So, what did you make of the game with the Buckeyes coming out as national champs?
Well, I mean, I haven't watched a whole lot of college football in my life, as you guys know, but I did make it my mission to watch most of this game at least, and I was entertained by it. Notre Dame scoring on their first drive, 18 plays, things looked really good for them. After that, though, things just went downhill. And for Ohio, I mean, props to them. They got a touchdown of their own on their first drive that ended up going into the second quarter because, I mean, Notre Dame's first one took a while to complete. But after that, they followed up with two more touchdowns of their own in the second, plus another one in the third, as you said, 31-7 JC at one point in the game. And as you also mentioned too, Notre Dame did start to mount a comeback, but it was very, very late in the fourth where the dagger was placed in the hearts of Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish fans with the final field goal to seal the deal. But I thought it was a great game. Congratulations, Ohio State. It was very well played, and I look forward to seeing what both of these schools and teams can do next year and heading into the future, and see, will we have a rematch at some point? I think if we did, that would be quite something to see.
Well, I think if Marcus Freeman stays with the Fighting Irish, which right now is a possibility, he gets an NFL job because I know he got interviewed for the Bears job, which again just got hired. Ben Johnson did, the former OC of the Lions. So he's been up for some NFL jobs. We'll see if Marcus Freeman either takes one or is offered one, vice versa. Or if he does stay with Notre Dame, I think he probably will stay with Notre Dame for now. But the NFL interest is undeniable for a lot of these college coaches now with the transfer portal and everything that now goes into being a college coach in both football, basketball, and etc. But now, guys, moving over to baseball, we haven't talked a lot about the Blue Jays, obviously in the offseason, as they miss out on Shohei Ohtani. They miss out on Juan Soto. They miss out on Japanese phenomenal pitcher Roki Sasaki. They miss out on a lot of top tier free agents. They finally get one, sort of. Anthony Santander, former Orioles outfielder, 5 years, $92.5 million over the 5 years. There is an extra option year, which will make it a 6-year, $110 million contract. There also is an opt out in those 5 years. So a lot going into this. Lucas, Santander had 44 homers last year for Baltimore, and obviously the Jays needed a bat, needed someone that can have some power, some juice. Santander does bring that. Now he fits into an outfield where I'm assuming he plays a corner. It's just now who plays center, because obviously Kiermaier is no longer a Jay. A lot of questions still for the Blue Jays, but I think he's a very valuable bat that the Jays obviously needed with how bad they were in the lineup this year.
Absolutely a bat they needed. And I mean, you have some great hitters like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on the team. You know that he's good for multiple home runs in the season, but getting this 44 home run hitter in Santander, I like it for the Jays. I've seen people kind of questioning it online as to, why would they go this route? I've also seen people absolutely loving this acquisition. So, as every acquisition goes in any sport, only time will tell how Santander and the Blue Jays go, but I have some high hopes for this move and for this acquisition. Obviously, he's a great player, great hitter. As you mentioned, 44 home runs last year or last season with the Orioles. I think if he can get somewhere up to that again, he even said that he's here to win a championship. So we'll see if he can do good on his word and help the Blue Jays have some playoff success this upcoming season.
Well, JC, what did you make of Anthony Santander becoming the newest member of the Toronto Blue Jays?
In a word, meh. I mean, I looked at the Blue Jays' potential opening day lineup today, and it's for $235 million. I think that's the estimated payroll right now for 2025. That's hot garbage that's going to miss the postseason by 10 wins. Do I have a few minutes to go off on Blue Jays management?
Of course you do,
cool?
JC. Yeah, you got a couple minutes. We got about 10 left. So you're good to go.
All right, here we go. Listen, I don't know what this team is doing. Sasaki was another disaster. It was right up there with the Ohtani disaster, where we were almost to the point of like tracking his flight again. Why are we doing this to ourselves, Blue Jays fans? This is so stupid. I don't know what the management trust is doing right now between Shapiro and Atkins, but it just seems like all they're doing, honestly, is bailing out their old buddies in Cleveland. And it goes back to this December signing of Andres Jimenez or whoever that is, who's on a monster $106.5 million contract that even Cleveland's like, oh, we got to get rid of this. And the Jays were like, we'll help you. We'll take that. And then they do the same thing, thinking they're going to get Sasaki and taking another player from Cleveland, Miles Straw, so they can open up international money that it turns out they didn't need because they didn't get him. The Dodgers didn't have the international money, but guess what? They did it after the fact, after he signed on the dotted line. So how stupid is this? Are these two guys just setting up a Cleveland team that's going to be easy to take over when they're done the renovations in Toronto? Because that's what it seems like. It doesn't seem they give a rat's ass about Toronto or the team or the future. They're just trying to go through the motions right now, and nobody wants to play in Toronto. That's the hard reality right now. And you're just getting the leftovers. You're getting a pitcher from the Phillies that has back and shoulder issues and might fizzle out in 6 months. They just threw a boatload of money while at the same time letting Romano walk. Like, what is happening in Toronto? This is not going to go well. It's not going to end well. And they're still overcharging now for seats. They're not going to have fans this season. I'm going to go to a game. I always do. I'm going to take my niece to our annual skip school for the Jays game in April, probably against the Braves. And guess what? They're going to be terrible. They're probably going to lose that game. Like, it's going to be a disastrous season. And the only thing fans want is Guerrero Jr. locked up to a long-term deal. You haven't done that yet. And guess what? You're not going to be able to afford to when time comes around, because the Yankees are going to get the money. The Dodgers will probably get the money. How much money do they have in deferred payments like now? Like $1 trillion? It's ridiculous. Like, start doing something different, because this is not working. Are we still good for time?
Yeah, no, we're still good, JC. And honestly, that's been my biggest question throughout this entire Juan Soto deal, sweepstakes, the just Hatani sweepstakes, now the Sasaki sweepstakes. How attractive is Toronto? Like, and I genuinely mean that as a question. I'm a Yankees fan. I don't cheer for the Jays. I don't act like I do. I hope they lose. But like, I just don't know how attractive the Jays are as an option. I don't know. And obviously, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., as you mentioned, still needs to be locked up to a long-term extension. Who knows how much money that will be when he does get signed, if that's what the Jays are elsewhere next summer. Obviously, Bo Bichette had a horrible year last year at the plate. You hope some of that comes back, but does Bo Bichette get a long-term deal, or does he find a way out of Toronto too? I don't know. Like, it seems like a flawed roster created by, no offense, flawed executives that haven't been replaced somehow through different managers, different setups, and it's kind of been one of those, you had a golden generation with Calvin Biggio, with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., with Bo Bichette, with Alek Manoah, with all these young guys that were coming up, and nothing's happened. The team hasn't gotten better. None of them have been signed or locked up, and it seems like they're just treading water, JC, as you kind of alluded to. They're just treading water, and it'll be interesting to see if something changes, or if it is the hierarchy that gets shaken down by Rogers, who own the team. So it'll be really interesting to see how all of that kind of transpires this summer, as, again, Santander is the first big signing. And as you mentioned, JC, no offense, the lineup still isn't good. One bat's not enough. They need a couple more, at least a couple more, to make the lineup even middle of the pack? Like, that's just honest. And I'm a Yankees fan who lost Juan Soto, one of the best hitters in baseball, who knows my lineup looks like garbage right now. So you just got to find a way to get some more guys. If that's through free agency, if that's through trade, yeah, it's up to the Jays to decide. But we'll move off of baseball. We'll go to the NHL. Connor McDavid and I believe I'm right in saying this, has gotten his first NHL suspension of his career, 3-game suspension for cross-check, as well as Tyler Myers in the same game got a 3-game suspension for cross-checking. Both had in-person hearings with the NHL guys. So interesting to see the best player in hockey get a suspension. Rare for that to happen. And not going to argue he didn't deserve it. Now, I know Leon Draisaitl came out and said he should have got as many games. I know even Rick Tocchet of the Canucks coaching staff said he shouldn't have got as many games as he did. So I guess I'll go to you, Lucas, first. Do you think the suspensions were fair to Tyler Myers and to Connor McDavid for their cross-checking situations in that game?
Well, you got taking it back to the Austin Matthews situation a few years ago. He got 2 games for that, and I think that 2 games for Myers and McDavid would have been fair. I know a lot of people that I've seen would agree with me on that. I didn't actually think that it was going to be 3 or higher. Kind of surprised me. I knew that suspensions had to be coming because you can't do that. It's just a nasty play. I know you're frustrated, but there's 2 seconds left in the game. It's not like there's still 1 period left to go, and you're just trying to either batter the other team down or get your team a bit of momentum. There's 2 seconds. All you had to do was just let time run off the clock and go back to the dressing room. You would have avoided this whole suspension entirely. But, they got a very much deserved game misconduct, because they're definitely needed for those 2 seconds. It was just very, very confusing for me as to why it even happened in the first place. I get it. You're frustrated. These things happen in the NHL all the time. It's a physical game, but you just can't do cross checks like that. It was dirty, did deserve a suspension, but 3, I don't know. I feel like that's just a little bit too much.
JC, what did you make of the suspensions to Connor McDavid and Tyler Myers?
Well, they were both very different situations. Like Tyler Myers happened after the play outside of a scrum where he raised his stick and very clearly cross-checked a guy in the head. So I guess the NHL kind of looked at it from the perspective of, well, if we're giving this guy 3 games, the hit, the intention, everything that McDavid did was the exact same. Now, McDavid was totally tied up the entire time by Connor Garland. And I watched that play. And I mean, if the officials want to prevent that from happening, they need to make a call. And I keep reading over and over again, like, this is the difference between the NFL and the NHL. You don't protect your stars. Well, there's the other criticism has always been that star players get different treatment when in fact they should be given the same treatment. A penalty is a penalty, a match penalty, whatever should be the same regardless of who throws it, and the consequences should be the same. In McDavid's case, he very clearly came back with an intention to hurt. Like, he was not thinking in the moment. So the NHL just went 3 games for that guy. Seems like 3 games for this guy. They had to if they were going to hand out the same penalty in the same game for the same incident. But again, I don't buy the we have to protect our stars. McDavid's learned his lesson. It's probably going to cost him the scoring race. It's probably going to cost him the MVP vote. So, I mean, enough's enough for him. A lesson learned. But at the end of the day, the goal isn't, winning those 2 trophies. It's winning the Stanley Cup. So they got to figure a few things out.
Which was 1 game short of last year, JC. He was just almost there, won the Conn Smythe even, which makes it even a little bit worse for him. We will talk about the 4 Nations coming up in about a month's time. We also just ran out of time to talk about the JT Miller trade that got nixed to the New York Rangers. We'll see if JT Miller gets traded as the NHL trade deadline inches closer. But for JC Coots, Lucas Ireland, myself, Spencer Byers, and the great Mark Perry behind the camera, we will see you next week on RTV Sports Rap here on Rogers TV.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
Missing your favorite channels? Get them on Rogers Xfinity TV.
So much money at stake, so much on the line. Bringing out the big guns.
You are the Beyonce of Food Network.
Is that a road trip or what?